If you're listening to this on your phone, maybe, or perhaps you've driven an electric car today,
Mm,
you're actually experiencing technology powered uh, by critical materials.
absolutely. Essential stuff.
And these elements often come from places many of us, well, haven't really heard much about.
That's true. Far-flung places, often.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into one such nation, Niger. It's a country in the Sahel region of Africa,
Right.
and they've made a recent, really dramatic decision that has sent genuine shockwaves across the global resource market.
Yeah, it's a big one. We're talking about Niger's, well, audacious move to nationalize its largest uranium mine.
A mine that was previously controlled by a French state-linked company, right?
Exactly, or Rano. And we've gone through, a lot of transcripts, reports, analyses to really get the full picture here.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to unpack why. Why did Niger take this step?
And what are they doing next, with these valuable resources?
And also how this decision isn't just reshaping Niger's future, but it's also sort of rippling out, influencing global geopolitics.
Yeah, what really comes through in the sources is that this isn't just like a minor policy tweak.
Yeah.
It's a huge declaration of sovereignty. It's a blueprint almost for a whole new national identity.
Okay, so to really grasp this, we need to go back to the beginning, the spark, as the sources are calling it.
The inciting incident.
That decisive moment, the clean break. So in 2025, Niger's transitional military government, they announced the nationalization of the Somar uranium mine.
And crucially, this wasn't a renegotiation. It wasn't asking for better terms.
No, it was, as the sources put it, a clean break. Just full stop.
An unapologetic severing, they called it, of a decades-old colonial tether. Strong words.
Very strong. And when you look at the history, you start to see why.
Yeah, the context is everything here. This Somar site, it's up in Arlit, northern Niger.
Right.
And Orano, the French company, had been running it since 1971.
71. Wow.
Yeah, for a long time. And the irony, it's just stark, isn't it? France relied heavily on Niger's uranium. It powered their nuclear grid.
Kept the lights on in France.
Absolutely. But Niger itself, it remained one of the most energy-deprived nations on Earth.
So they're exporting this white gold, as it's called.
While their own people often, lived without basics like running water or electricity for decades.
It's hard to score that. And the numbers, when you dig into them.
The numbers really tell the story. Orano had a 63% stake in the mine. Okay, majority, but listen to this. They reportedly controlled 86.3% of the actual uranium output for over 5 decades.
Wait, 86%, with only a 63% stake.
Exactly. That kind of imbalance, well, anywhere else it would raise serious eyebrows.
You'd think.
But in that post-colonial context, it just reignited this simmering rage. You can understand why.
Totally. So the new leaders in Niger, they didn't pull any punches.
No, they called it exploitation, plain and simple.
So taking the mine back wasn't just about the asset itself.
No, it was, as the sources really emphasize, a declaration of sovereignty. The message was loud and clear.
We're not your warehouse anymore.
Pretty much. We will no longer dig while you thrive. That was the essence of it.
Okay, so backdrop of exploitation, this powerful declaration.
Yeah.
How did the world react? And maybe more importantly, how did people in Niger react?
Well, the international reaction was sharply divided, as you might expect.
Right.
The West seemed rattled. France, obviously, was furious. Their media often painted it as, reckless, irresponsible.
Standard playbook, maybe.
Perhaps. But inside Niger, a completely different story. Reports of street vendors cheering.
Really?
Yeah. Radio hosts debating, okay, what else should we take back? And then across the region, on social media, neighboring countries.
The ripple effect.
Exactly. People asking, could we be next? So for Niger, this was way beyond just economics. It was defiance, self-determination, a message heard well beyond its borders.
And it feels like that message, that act of reclaiming the uranium, sparked something deeper within the leadership, too.
I think that's right. Because while getting the uranium back was huge, symbolically and economically, it also kind of laid bare this fundamental truth. Relying on just one resource makes your economy incredibly fragile.
The single commodity trap.
Exactly. So it seems Niger's leaders realized they didn't just want to own the uranium, they wanted to escape its shadow completely.
Get out from under it.
Yeah, move away from that single commodity reliance, shed that identity of being, as one source rather pointedly called it, a nuclear colony disguised as a trade partner.
Oof. Okay, so that brings us to the next phase then. Beyond just uranium.
Precisely. Beyond uranium mining a new identity. That's where they headed next.
So Niger's looking past uranium, trying to, yeah, literally mine a new identity. It's not just about digging up different stuff, is it? It's a bigger shift.
It's a profound reorientation. They've started, somewhat quietly actually, shifting focus to the rest of their mineral underworld.
Copper, lithium, gold.
Exactly, aiming to become, potentially, Africa's next mineral powerhouse. That's the ambition.
Okay, let's get specific. First up, copper. Where are they looking?
The Agadez region. And significantly, it's a state-owned company, SA, that got the rights.
State-owned. That's key.
Very key. And the plan is ambitious. Produce 2,700 tons a year for a decade.
And copper's vital, right, for the green transition.
Absolutely critical. It's a conductor of electricity, essential in the renewable energy transition, irreplaceable in wiring motors and grids. It signals Niger wants a real piece of that future global energy shift.
Okay, then there's lithium, the battery metal.
Right. This is happening in a smaller district in it. A local company this time, Comrex SA, got the permit.
Local, interesting. Scale.
Initial scale is modest, yeah. 300 tons per year over 5 years.
Yeah.
But the significance is huge.
They're entering the EV battery race.
Exactly. Lithium powers your phone, your laptop, electric cars, and the timing here is just fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, what's the global context making this lithium move so, well, strategic right now?
It's happening just as Western countries are desperately trying to diversify their lithium supplies.
Moving away from China's dominance.
Precisely. So Niger, even on a small scale initially, puts itself right onto that diversification map. It's clever.
Okay, copper, lithium,
Mhm.
and then gold. Something more traditional.
More ancient, yeah. Gold mining isn't new in Niger, but it's often been, informal, artisanal.
Right. Small scale,
Yeah.
sometimes unregulated.
Exactly. Now, the government's trying to formalize these operations, especially in the Western regions.
Why formalize? What's the benefit?
Well, the sources say it means better safety, more revenue, and less environmental chaos. Makes sense.
Sure.
But it's also symbolic. Gold is global money. Unlike uranium, it doesn't need these complex political pathways or specialized buyers.
Just says,
It's a universal asset, and Niger wants a legitimate slice of that pie.
So across copper, lithium, gold, there's a common thread here in how they're approaching it, right? Compared to the past.
A critical difference, yes. In the past, foreign companies led, locals, they followed or just provided labor. Now, Niger is deliberately putting state-backed national firms at the center. They control the permits, direct the exploration, and crucially, retain ownership.
So the message is fundamentally different.
Completely. It's, we're no longer just the miners, we're the owners. That's the core of this whole mineral shift.
But owning the minerals, that's step one. Getting them out of the ground into market. That's step 2, 3, 4.
Exactly. You can't build a mining empire alone. You need the huge machines, the technical know-how, access to markets, financing.
Big challenges.
Huge. And since their old strategy, relying on Western corporations, effectively collapsed with the nationalization,
They needed new partners.
they sought out, as the sources put it, an entirely different set of global actors, a whole new address book.
This really feels like a conscious pivot, moving away from dependency towards partnership.
Or at least partnerships on their terms.
Right. From that old colonial leverage dynamic to something based on maybe mutual interest.
That seems to be the goal. Reaching beyond its former colonizer, looking for nations with resources, ambition, and crucially, a different kind of history with Africa.
A major strategic realignment. So who are these new friends? Who do they turn to?
Well, first, Russia. In 2025, Niger signed a memorandum of understanding with Moscow.
Focused on what?
Things like geological research, resource mapping, mining cooperation, leveraging apparently Russian satellite technology, seismic tools, mining logistics.
How does Niger view that relationship?
The sense from the sources is that Niger sees it as purely transactional, strategic, clean business.
Okay. And then, interestingly, they also engaged with partners that might, let's say, raise eyebrows in Western capitals.
Like Iran, talks emerged there centered on uranium, the very resource France had just lost control of.
That's bold. How did Niger frame that?
Well, while some in the West voiced concern, Niger's perspective seemed to be, quite simply, Iran was a buyer who paid in full, no lectures attached.
Wow. That signals a huge shift in power dynamics.
It really does. Niger was no longer just a source. It was a broker of power, playing the field.
And who else? Any other major players involved?
Oh, yes. China. An ever-present force in African development, of course.
Right. What's their role?
Chinese mining and infrastructure firms started increasing their footprint, especially in those new lithium and copper zones.
And what did they offer? What was the deal?
Unlike some past deals involving, say, the IMF, there weren't demands for policy reforms or austerity attached, according to the sources.
No structural adjustment.
Seemingly not. Instead, they offered things Niger desperately needed: equipment, roads, training, and guaranteed markets for the minerals.
And the terms.
The sources highlight the terms were framed as minerals for development, not for debt. A very different proposition.
So from Niger's viewpoint, this isn't just about finding buyers, it's a geopolitical rebalancing act.
Absolutely. And while critics in the West might talk about dangerous alliances or resource capture,
Those arguments might ring a bit hollow in Niger.
well, you can imagine. Especially given how the previous Western-led model hadn't exactly lifted them out of poverty over 50 years. So what did these new partners really offer beyond just deals?
Good question. Is it more than just economics?
It seems so. For Niger, these partners offer vital political solidarity. They act as counterweights to the global system that arguably kept African nations near the bottom.
A different kind of relationship.
Maybe one based on respect without strings, which is a powerful contrast to colonial history. Of course, there were consequences.
Like what?
Foreign aid from the West, especially France and the EU, started drying up, but apparently Niger's leaders saw that coming. They'd anticipated it.
Budgeted for it, perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay, so shifting alliances, new mining deals, that's the high-level stuff.
Right, but the ultimate test, the real measure of success for this whole revolution, it's not in boardrooms or geological surveys.
It's on the ground.
Exactly. It's in the villages where, remember, over 40% of the population lives in poverty.
So the massive challenge is, how do you take that global bargaining power, that mineral wealth?
And turn it into real tangible benefits for ordinary Nigerians. How do you get bread, roads, schools, and hope to the people?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't
It
it?
is. And Niger's leadership seems acutely aware of this. That's why they launched this really sweeping initiative, the National Economic Development Fund.
Okay, tell us about that. What is it?
It's framed as more than an economic strategy. It's a political promise.
How does it work? How's it different from before?
Well, unlike those old, often murky royalty deals where profits could vanish.
Yeah, into offshore accounts or wherever.
Right. This fund is designed specifically to capture mining revenue and reinvest it directly into Nigerian society.
Directly. How?
The mechanism is pretty straightforward, on paper at least. A fixed percentage of all mining profits goes into this national fund.
Okay.
And that money is then earmarked to finance essential services: infrastructure, agriculture, education, health.
So the idea is wealth from the ground builds things above ground.
That's the hope. Every dollar extracted from the ground is expected to raise something above it. That's the core principle.
It's a powerful vision. Are we actually seeing this happen yet? Any early examples?
Yeah, there are some encouraging early signs mentioned in the census. For instance, out near Mari, revenue linked to mining, channeled through the fund, is being used for solar-powered irrigation systems for local farmers.
Directly impacting food security. That's significant.
It is. And in Zinder, a region struggling with youth unemployment, the fund is backing technical training centers.
Focusing on what kind of skills?
Mining-related skills, specifically. Things like surveying, machinery maintenance, trying to build a local workforce that can actually participate in this new economy.
So real structural investments, not just handouts.
That seems to be the goal. But what's perhaps most, radical about this fund is how it's structured.
How so?
It features decentralization. It's not just the central government in Niamey deciding where every cent goes.
Interesting. So who else is involved?
It incorporates local councils and community leaders in the decision-making process.
Really? So communities near the mines have a say.
That's the plan. They're empowered to direct a share of the profits toward their priorities.
Can you give an example?
Sure. There's mention of Chibarakaten, a remote village near some gold areas. They formed a community oversight board.
And what do they choose to fund?
Their first projects, according to the reports, a medical outpost and clean water pumps. Basic essential needs identified by the community itself.
That model feels like it could tackle that boomtown problem where wealth gets extracted but locals see nothing.
Exactly. It aims to break that pattern. And it's also, you could argue, a smart defensive move.
How defensive?
Well, if people see the mine as their project benefiting their community.
They see it as their lifeline, not their curse.
Precisely.
What?
That potentially prevents resentment, maybe even insurgency down the line, gives people a stake?
Of course, it sounds great on paper, but there must be challenges. This isn't easy.
Oh, absolutely not. Corruption is named as a huge, persistent threat. That requires constant vigilance, watchdogs, civil society, international scrutiny.
And just having the money isn't enough, right?
Right.
Local governments need to be able to manage it effectively.
That's the technical capacity issue. Part of the fund is actually being directed towards capacity building programs for those local governments, training them how to manage these new resources.
And what about the environmental side? Mining can be messy.
Yeah, the fund also aims to address illicit extraction and environmental damage. There are incentives, apparently, for reporting illegal mining and for cleanup efforts.
Any examples are?
One mention is in Liptako, a gold region. Funding is being used to help miners replace dangerous mercury-based mining practices with safer methods.
So it's ambitious. It covers economic development, local empowerment, governance, environment.
It's a huge undertaking. It really is Niger's massive gamble.
The gamble being.
That the very same ground that was stripped and exported under foreign rule for decades
Can now actually finance the nation's rebirth. From the ground up.
Exactly. It's a profound bet on themselves.
What a journey. From that colonial history, the exploitation.
That clean break with the uranium nationalization.
And the pivot away from just one resource, diversifying into copper, lithium, gold.
Finding new global partners, Russia, Iran, China, on different terms.
And culminating in this really radical commitment, trying to channel that mineral wealth directly back to the people through this National Economic Development Fund.
Aiming for real, tangible, widespread development. It's quite a story.
It really is. So, as you've listened to this deep dive into Niger's path, what does it make you think? Consider this profound gamble they're taking, redefining sovereignty, reshaping their economy from the ground up. What does Niger's bold strategy reveal about the future? The future of global resources, of national sovereignty, especially in our rapidly changing world.
It's a big question.
Do you think more nations might need to, or choose to, follow a similar path? Something to mull over.